So when I said this in my most recent video, I was fully intending to just leave it at that. A snappy little moment that expressed frustration at the community reaction to a decent DLC is all it was meant to be. But then that happened. And I have many frustrations with this decision, and believe you me, we are going to get into it. But my main one that causes me to bring up my rant within a rant is the fact that the same members of the Destiny community who expressed frustration at not knowing what the Veil is, a MacGuffin that was always set up to be mysterious, have no kind of anger or energy to make a video about the fridging of a female character in the same game. So I guess someone fucking has to. Hello everyone, my name is Jade, otherwise known as Scarlet Rebel, and this is a hard one to make, I'm not gonna lie. We're going to talk about a lot here. Why Amanda's death was so uncomfortable, fridging as a trope, why it's dangerous for a game like Destiny, and the community reaction to it. Full frontal, I'm really disappointed in this decision. So if you're ambivalent or don't get the fuss, I ask you to watch this video as respectfully as possible. There are plenty of people frustrated, confused, and upset about Amanda Holliday's death for good reason. For myself, it's not necessarily the fact that she died, but the way in which she did, and how the narrative handled it. So let's just jump straight in by ripping the band-aid off. Why was Amanda Holliday's death so aggravating?
I'm here. In position?
I have located the prisoners. Come with me. Quickly.
It's gone into lockdown.
We're trapped.
I'm on it. Come on.
Go. Now. We are through. The hatch leads outside. We are safe.
That's all that matters.
When a character dies, especially a beloved one, as a writer the reaction you want people to have is upset. Sadness, grief, maybe even a little anger. When I watched this for the first time, I felt deeply, viscerally uncomfortable. Before I explain why, let me go ahead and play Amanda's death side by side with another female character in Destiny who died in a similar way back in Rise of Iron, Lady Yalda. I didn't know anything about Lady Yalda when I went into Rise of Iron, but from this scene I was able to ascertain a lot about who she was as a person and the sacrifice she had just made, without there needing to be any back and forth dialogue or years of narrative build-up. Just looking at the expression on her face, you can see that she's making the decision to blow up the chamber with Siva within it under extreme duress. It's a solemn sacrifice, her face is grim and afraid. She knows that this is the only way to keep this threat that the Iron Lords have woken up contained. The camera only zooms in on her at the last possible moment, when the doors close, sealing her fate and the fate of the Iron Lords. Amanda, on the other hand, she messes with wires in a console for entirely too long and then stands around instead of making any kind of movement despite being in an active combat zone. After a hollow and hallmark set of last words, her hair flies backwards, her chest gets pushed out, and her face is soft and calm and serene. Her eyes are closed and overall her face is emotionless. It's It's pretty. Her arms remained fixed by her side and the fire whips around her. She looks like a goddamn Barbie doll. Her death, her physical, actual death, was constructed in such a male gaze way that it's infuriating. And I'm sure people will ask me what I expected given the fact that the explosion was coming from behind her, but come on, that's a lame excuse. Bungie controlled all of this. They could have written a million other ways for her to die that wouldn't have made that pinnacle moment feel so picturesque and as though it was for other people and not to highlight Amanda's final moments and ultimate sacrifice. At least her death was a noble sacrifice. Amanda dies saving prisoners taken by the Shadow Legion and by extension the Witness under its orders. Whilst the prisoners were trapped by the Shadow Legion, they were... Oh, hang on, where is it? They were being tortured? No, that's not right. Killed? Were they being killed? Oh, no, because they were just being held in those little cells. We don't know why the Witness was taking civilian prisoners. All we know is that they were being kidnapped. That's it. And look, given the Veil fiasco, I've been very loud about reminding people that Bungie write in mystery, that all will be revealed and we don't get answers straight away. We very rarely have. The fact is, we're not talking about a mystery MacGuffin plot device. We're talking about a dangerous set of tropes revolving around a female character death. Not having answers in the narrative right now in this moment makes Amanda's death feel uncomfortable and frustrating on a social level rather than a narrative one. And I think feedback for a female character death is a tad more important than a MacGuffin, don't you? I've seen people argue that Amanda could recognise the fact that the Cabal numbers on the screen were actually a countdown to a bomb going off and not a lockdown as she told Misrax. And I see that, she's got the know-how from fighting the Cabal for so long and being an engineer, and she's kind-hearted enough to not make Misrax or the prisoners panic by telling them it's a bomb. Especially if she knew she was going to have to hold the door open so that everyone could get out before it inevitably went off. The problem is that that wasn't apparent, like, at all. Again, if we compare it to Lady Yolda in Rise of Iron, so little dialogue was needed in order to cement the fact that she was sacrificing herself and her teammates to keep Siva contained. I personally had no idea that Amanda may have known that the countdown was to an explosion and not a lockdown. It literally did not cross my mind that she may have lied to Misrax and the prisoners to keep them calm. The worst part about that is that it suits Amanda's character to a T. A bold-faced lie in the name of kindness so that no one would tell her to stop what she was doing, so that no one would interfere and she could do what she thought was right. But where was that? Where was it in the narrative of this scene? You could argue that I'm just not observant enough, but I ask you once again to look at the two scenes. Even if you don't know anything about Rise of Iron or the threat of Siva, the current threat is so much more apparent in the Rise of Iron scene than in the Season of Defiance scene. Nothing Amanda does or says enlightens us to the fact that she may know that it's an explosion and not a lockdown. Regardless of if you caught onto her looking at the Cabal language on the screen, there's just no way of knowing what she was thinking. It wasn't apparent, not in her actions, not in what she said, or in the way she acted. To bring it back to my point, that is something that could be revealed later on in the season, in lore or another mission or something like that. It's worth mentioning that the finale for the season happened very early on, with Amanda's death occurring the week before. There was still more than a month of Season of Defiance left when Amanda died. Even so, it's a moot point, because the current lack of information makes this whole scene feel male-gazy and poorly written. I do also want to say that it may be unfair to compare Lady Yolda's death scene with Amanda's based on the assets Bungie had access to at the time. With Rise of Iron, they still had Activision's money, and potentially access to technology that made cutscenes and the like a lot easier, since Activision are known for the Call of Duties and a lot of movie games. Now, I'm not 100% certain if the Sony PlayStation money was starting to roll in around the time Season of Defiance was being developed, which feels like a really corporate thing to point out, but I promise I have a reason to do so. This may be the harshest thing I've ever said to Bungie, but if there was no way to express anything on Amanda's face or in her body language that would have made her seem like she wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time, then the scene should not have been written like this. And if the scene was locked in for some reason, there should have been more dialogue. Why couldn't we have had her solemnly say, "Oh no," when she saw the numbers, and then stumble over an explanation when Misrax asks her what's wrong? Or maybe even have her mutter something about a bomb that Misrax didn't catch, and then she lies to him. Otherwise, her sacrifice didn't feel like one. It felt like she was a fly getting caught in a honey trap, and there's just nothing noble about that on the surface, which makes all of these kind words said about her after the fact also feel hollow. And it's not just the way the scene was shot. Oh no, that is the tip of the iceberg. Amanda Holliday has been with us since the beginning of Destiny. She was the tower's shipwright, all-around badass, and one of our few connections to the last city. As Guardians, we rarely venture into the city itself, much to the chagrin of many players. It's often frustrating that the city is the pinnacle of what we protect as Guardians, that and the Traveller itself up until recently, and yet we've rarely made a connection with the people we protect. Amanda was one of few lightless characters who reminded us of the civilian population. The only other character who had as much of a spotlight shone onto them as Amanda was Soraya Hawthorne, a character who you could arguably state was written into base Destiny 2 to be that reminder, since the Red War story was about us being heroes without the light. Unfortunately, it has been a significant amount of time since Hawthorne has been relevant in Destiny's story. Aside from a few lore pieces here and there, we hear very little from the clan organizer now. Only veterans of Destiny 2 will remember what her role was. To really solidify how unfortunately irrelevant Hawthorne has become, they even patched out a little voice line she had when you gain a pinnacle reward with her, because of how irrelevant the things she was talking about had become.
You just never quit, do you? Took out Gaul, woke up the Traveler, and now half of what I hear in the streets is how much you and your clan are making a difference. And that's why I started this whole clan thing in the first place. People are still waiting for the Vanguard to lead the way. It's time for a change, and Guardians like you are making it happen. No pressure.
But why is this relevant to Amanda Holliday's death? Well, Hawthorne's gentle shoving to the side bolsters the frustration surrounding Amanda's death. The characters who are connected to the last city and venerate what it means to protect people without the light are being slowly pushed to the side, killed even, for reasons that on the surface seem to only be, this is war. Yeah, this is war, but this has been war for a really long time, as a subplot at most. That doesn't mean that you get to kill characters for that reason alone, in my opinion. In a previous video I did discussing character death and the meaning behind it, I struggled to find comfort in the notion that killing a character because they're a person who naturally gets involved in conflict was a good enough reason. And I feel that way about Amanda's death. And look, not everyone needs a cowboy kicking, prison swinging, rootin' tootin' death, okay? But when it feels like there's no tangible reason aside from people die in war, it becomes hollow. The only time that reasoning is okay is when it's a war film or a war game. Destiny is not a war game, it's a sci-fi fantasy. Not even, well, it raises the stakes, feels like a good enough explanation here. Because yeah, it does raise the stakes, I guess. We've got one less notable civilian in the tower, and things feel awful. Stakes raised, such danger, very wow. And I know a lot of people had a similar criticism of the end of Lightfall, and I'll be honest, the way characters like Zavala and Ikora reacted to what the Witness did to the Traveller did frustrate me too, because they seemed so solemnly okay with what had happened because we still had our light. The difference to me at least is that Lightfall represented the next chapter. Us losing and the stakes being raised via that loss was tangible, because something that has been a cornerstone in our story had changed. We had to adapt around it. Amanda was never set up to be something that had to be adapted around. Cade's loss, for example, literally shook up the Vanguard. It continues to do so to this day. But the futility of the way Amanda's death was written is reflected in the notion that the stakes have been raised. They have, but it doesn't feel like there's something changed. It just feels wrong. There's nothing to change, there's just nothing. But Jade, I hear you cry. So many characters have changed because of Amanda's death. Zavala grieves, Devrim has the strength to keep going, Mithrax blames himself, and Crow is struggling so hard. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not a good thing either. Because via Amanda's death, Crow in particular has an opportunity to change as a character, which is a dangerous trope commonly known as fridging. In 1999, comic book writer Gail Simone created a website called Women in Refrigerators. Simone is known for many DC comics, from Birds of Prey to Wonder Woman, even contributing to a run of Deadpool in 2003. The coining of the term was inspired by a Green Lantern run in 1994, in which the titular superhero at the time, Kyle Rayner, returns home to find his girlfriend killed and stuffed into his refrigerator by the current villain, Major Force. The goal of the website was to create a list of, if you'll forgive the 90s vernacular, super chicks who had been killed, kidnapped, tortured, and any other painful fate you can imagine. Simone explains on the website that being a huge fan of superheroes, she had noticed a pattern. I found that I most enjoyed reading about the girl heroes, or super chicks, and it had been nagging me for a while that in mainstream comics, being a girl superhero meant inevitably being killed, maimed, or depowered, it seemed. Heads up, if you intend to visit this website, observe the trigger warnings I've included in the description next to the link, because certain words are used very plainly, which is obviously not a bad thing, but just keep yourselves safe, okay? Simone's intent for the website was to ask, why are all these long-running female characters suddenly meeting these horrible fates? To the point where she even sent letters to fellow writers in the industry and published their responses unedited on the website. She goes on, some argued the question, some agreed, but every one of them knew exactly what I was asking about immediately. It's important to note that on this website, Simone doesn't necessarily point to the furthering of a male character's story being the reason for a female character death. She just wanted to document the deaths of female superheroes and ask other writers why they thought this was happening. However, in the same interview I just quoted, which is from 2014, so 15 years after the initial publication of the website, she says, it felt symbolic, it felt textual, it felt like they were saying, okay, no one cares about Supergirl, no one cares about Batgirl, and so their stories rarely became about survival. They became about some dude getting revenge on their behalf. Showcasing that, eventually, there was an answer as to why female superheroes were constantly being, as Simone so greatly puts it, depowered. So the big question here is, was Amanda Holliday fridged? Did her death only serve to further a male character's plotline? I am of course talking about Crow, who arguably took Amanda's death the hardest. In fact, the most frustrating part about all of this is that his feelings seem to be the focal point of the collective grief. Yes, other characters grieve too, Zavala in particular grieving very, very hard, but at the most he offers a single, albeit beautiful eulogy for Amanda. Mara also speaks of Amanda to the player, once, Devram speaks of her, once, and Misrax grieves with Keitel and Mara, once. It's very rare that other characters speak about Amanda outside of these singular instances without also consoling Crow, or talking about how hard Amanda's death has hit him specifically.
I worry for Crow. We all grieve, but he feeds a great anger.
Grief is a sharp blade. Used as a weapon, it cuts even the wielder. But sometimes the only paths remaining to us are painful ones.
Crow's grief has a special spotlight shone onto it. This demonstrates quite clearly that he is the one dealing the hardest with it, with all the other characters reaching out to him and helping him through it. Her death has become the focal point of his narrative. The TV Tropes page about fridging says, it should be noted that while the term most commonly applies to a male character's female love interest, it can actually be used in numerous different scenarios of all genders and different relations, from romantic, platonic, and familial. The core part is that one character is killed, or at least has something very bad happen to them, for the sake of causing emotional trauma for the target, with said victim often acting as a plot device more than a real character in the worst case scenarios. So let's break that sentence down with regards to Amanda. When Crow was resurrected and technically reintroduced into the game, he and Amanda were friendly immediately. We see this from the banter between the two of them during Season of the Chosen, the first season that Crow was working with the Vanguard in an official capacity. There's back and forth banter, playful jabs at each other's expense. Amanda even invites Crow out drinking, and it becomes a ritual between the two of them after missions.
And there's more where that came from!
I don't think they can hear you. Try yelling louder. Look, I get it. I do. But Zavala survived.
Do you have any idea what would happen if we lost him? They might as well cut our throats. That man is the glue holding us together.
You're close?
He's family. Like Cora too, and Cade. I miss him something fierce.
Cade 6. Wish I could have met him. Some of the stories I've heard.
Yeah. His killer got what was coming to him.
Does that make it easier?
Not really.
I'm sorry.
Hey, you wanna get a drink or something when we get back?
In the city? I've always wanted to try that.
You ain't never had a drink in the city before? Oh, Crow, buddy. Buckle up.
This didn't lead to an obvious romance between the two though. When Crow is shown by Savathun who he used to be, and that in his past life as Uldren Sov he had a hand in Cade's death, he doesn't tell Amanda right away. It's only during Season of the Haunted, a few months after he regained his memories, that we see the two conversing about it, with Amanda being open about her feelings of betrayal.
We need to talk.
This is not a good time.
It's never a good time. I've been trying to talk to you for weeks and you keep dodging me.
I can't. It's not... Amanda...
How long did you know? How long have you known who you were? We're done. We're done here. I do not have time for this, for you, for anything.
Wait. I was scared. I am scared. People used to kill me for something I didn't... You don't understand!
I cared about you and you lied to me. You wore that mask. You kept secrets from me, pretended to be my friend.
Amanda, I am your friend.
No, you're not. I had a friend and you murdered him.
It's important to note that before Season of the Haunted, there were some lore pieces that touched on Amanda's feelings about Crow's betrayal of her trust. So whilst it took a while for us to hear anything about their relationship after this conflict in what you could consider the immediate narrative, the breadcrumbs of it were there. However, we'll touch on this a little more later. What's important right now is the fact that the answer to the question, were Crow and Amanda in a romantic subplot, doesn't necessarily lie in the narrative. In fact, in the This Week at Bungie article that dropped after Amanda's death, it explicitly states that they were just friends. In my 100% personal opinion, Season of Defiance felt like it was purposefully leaving their relationship ambiguous. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, despite being, personally, again, a bit frustrating, according to TV tropes, it doesn't matter how their relationship was defined on paper. What we do know is that they cared about each other, they had a relationship. One that Amanda was willing to mend one day in spite of everything.
Amanda, I need to talk to you.
What? Before it's too late?
Yes.
Crow, don't.
I thought I'd lost you.
Don't talk to me like that. Look, I know you're sorry. I know it wasn't really you. I want to forgive you. I really do. I tried to pull Crow and Uldren Sov apart.
I tried too. But it wasn't right.
I wish I could see you another way, but I don't. I can't. Not yet.
Tell me what to do and I'll do it.
It's not like that. I know it ain't fair to you. And maybe I'll feel different someday. But not now.
I understand.
There's tough times ahead of us. We gotta work together. It's like y'all's ghosts always say. Eyes up, Guardian.
So regardless of how you view them, be it as two close friends or potential lovers, one of which was deeply betrayed, Amanda's death could still count as a fridging by the definition that we are working with. Secondly, it is undeniable that Amanda Holliday had a character of her own outside of Crow's influence. I think when I spoke about lightless and civilian characters in the first section, I covered her standing on her own as a character pretty succinctly. People are mad that she, as a beloved character, has been killed off in such a bad-feeling way, because she's been with us for so long. Therefore, she obviously hasn't been created and then used as nothing more than a plot device for a male character's development, which is a small victory in the face of everything. So where does this fear of her death becoming a plot device for a male character come from? Well, surprising absolutely no one, those fears revolve entirely around Crow, his current grief, and his potential future actions. I've already shown Amanda's death, but for the sake of this section, let's go ahead and play the whole scene for context, along with the aftermath.
Guardian, kick down their front door while we slip in the back. We'll meet you inside.
Mithrax, I must speak with haste. Turn back now. This is not a fight you can win.
You cannot share fear with us, Aramis, for the light provides.
Leave these captives and live to see your great machine again. Pursue this quest, and you will die.
Mithrax,
The ship stealer is allied with the voice in the darkness, but she does not speak lies. Perhaps there is something here we do not yet see.
There's always something. I'm not leaving our people behind, no matter what.
And I am with you.
I warned you.
Where's Amanda?
Amanda, come in. Amanda. Are you there? Devotion, bravery, sacrifice. Devotion, bravery, sacrifice.
Guardian, Zavala grieves, and Mizrax is recovering in the infirmary. How do you want to proceed?
We have to regroup. Bury Amanda. And put her killers in the ground.
They'll be expecting you.
Good.
Think with your head, not your heart. Grief is poor counsel.
And yours is better? Make arrangements for Amanda. The Guardian and I will handle it from here.
If that's your wish.
It is. I know you want it too. Vengeance. You'll be the first to know when it's time.
Now, as per the conclusion of Season of Defiance, Crow never necessarily gained revenge, or went through with getting it. At least not overtly, I suppose. In the sort of second part to the finale, a mission called Retribution, Crow, Mizrax, Devrim, and Mara all work together with the Guardian to take out the prison ship in Earth's orbit above the EDZ. There's a sense that this one act is some sort of recompense for Amanda's death and what they took from us, as Crow puts it. However, it's not explicitly said that Crow's vengeance is enacted upon. Okay, look, it's Future Jade here. I was about halfway through editing this video when this Retribution mission came out, and I played it and I figured I should address it. At the end of the day though, it doesn't really change how I feel about Amanda's death, and my overall argument in this video still stands. What I do want to say about it though is that it's kind of really frustrating that we went from Crow growling about vengeance one week to a buddy cop meet-up mission to blow up one of the prison ships that has been giving us trouble the whole season in less than 20 minutes a few weeks later. From the get-go, Crow is back to his slightly goofy, optimistic self in the Retribution mission, which is great. I much prefer that characterization of him, and to be quite frank, I wish we'd seen more of it. I know he was grieving Amanda, and anger is a normal emotion to experience with grief. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been grieving at all, but the difference in Crow between Amanda's death and the mission is really stark, and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. It feels like the writers wanted to hinge on Crow wanting revenge one week and then just changed their minds in the Retribution mission. I wish they'd have had him set up the mission better by saying that Amanda's death was the final straw. It's time to finally fight back. I'll get everything set up, you'll know when it's time, etc, etc. Or something like that. I just wish they'd have had him say anything other than the word vengeance. On that note, and back to past Jade. Him swearing vengeance was eye-roll inducing, for myself at least.
Vengeance.
Who are you gonna get revenge on, Crow? The entire Shadow Legion, nitroglycerin, fire itself? If the narrative was trying to paint it as Aramis's fault, it certainly didn't paint her as pulling the trigger. He also never named her, and after she showed up to warn/save Mizrax, she disappeared. So who, Crow? Who the hell are you getting revenge on?
Vengeance.
Despite the stupidity, we need to mention the fact that even if revenge wasn't acted on by Crow, it's still in the wind. I say this because in the finale, Mara consoles Crow on his grief. And as a side note, it sucks that we get such fantastic lines from Crow, negating Mara's worry of him by citing the neglect that Uldren suffered at her hands, in a season that is littered with confusing and frustrating narrative choices. We even get Mara admitting that such abuse was for herself only. No apology though, but I guess we're getting there. She warns him against pushing others away from him in his grief, that guarding his heart to try and save other people's feelings won't help him, and he seems to agree.
Crow,
What do you want?
I wish to speak with you.
I don't have time for this. Or for you.
We've all lost someone dear to us.
If you mean me, you don't show it.
I wanted to. But I held my heart so closely that I smothered it. I don't want to see you do the same.
You don't know me. Stop talking like you do.
I know how we grieve. It is raw and violent. I know we believe that keeping others away from it will protect them. But we don't do it to protect them. We do it to protect ourselves. We do it because it is easy.
Nothing about this is easy. You didn't know her.
Then tell me who she was.
She was a sunrise.
Grieve its setting. But do not turn your grief to armor. Let us bear you through it.
I'll try.
I know you will.
It's the "I'll try" part that worries me the most. Hence why I say his need for vengeance is still in the wind. And even with that being said, as TV Tropes mentions, revenge doesn't have to play into the narrative for a female character to be considered fridged. This is such a common trope that it's more of an umbrella term, and there are other more specific terms for it based on the situation. Given Crow's actions and words since Amanda died, he easily fits into a couple of different subsections here, most notably collateral angst. When spoken about by itself, collateral angst mainly talks about character A taking the spotlight off of loved one character B, who is in that moment in recovery due to something violent happening to them that depowers them. They haven't necessarily been killed, but when paired with fridging, the trope becomes even more harmful. TV Tropes even goes on to describe stuffed in the fridge as the extreme version of collateral angst. The writers aren't directing the audience's sympathies towards the victim, but instead towards someone close to the victim. While the victim is recovering, their significant other is raving, "I failed to protect them," or "What happens to our relationship now?" Entire plotlines are devoted to how this person gets over the tragedy. The real point of the story isn't the victim was attacked, but look how protective / self-loathing / angsty / loving the victim's friend is. The scenario is set up for the friend to get character focus. The person who was hurt is collateral angst.
Amanda, I really thought there'd be more time to talk, to...
Holliday always was a good judge of character. She trusted her gut. I imagine she picked up on more than you think. No words required.
I hope so.
Anything that spurs Crow forward as a character from this point, especially if he cites Amanda's death as a reasoning, will make her death a fridging inarguably. That's the corner that Bungie have unfortunately written themselves into, whether it be on purpose or not. She's collateral angst for him now, overtly and obviously given the way he's been acting since her death. And that isn't even the only thing Crow says or does that makes Amanda Holliday's death a fridging. There's this too.
My hunters are tracking the orbital path of the Shadow Legion prison ship. Should be overhead soon.
You have mastered the intricacies of my power, Guardian. This ascent is yours alone to make.
The reason this is upsetting is because Crow has been set up to take the Hunter Vanguard place literally since Black Armory, which was the second sort of season of Destiny 2, back when Bungie started to experiment with seasons. Black Armory is when we saw Uldren Sov revived as a Guardian, and one of the first questions on everyone's lips was, is he going to become the Hunter Vanguard one day? This is because there is a long and very Hunter-esque tradition between the trading of Hunter Vanguard positions. It all revolves around a dare. Cade 6 became the Hunter Vanguard via a dare he entered with Andal Brask, his predecessor. Whichever one of them failed to kill Tanix the Scarred, yeah, that guy, would take up the dare. Cade succeeded, Andal lost, but years later Andal lost his life when Tanix was revealed to be alive still. Cade killed Tanix once more, and to boot, took up the Vanguard position out of a sense of honour. God, I love him, I miss him so much. One of my favourite missions from Forsaken, even though I had to play it through tears, was the Ace in the Hole mission after completing the main campaign. The mission was in aid of fixing Cade's beloved hand cannon, the Ace of Spades, after retrieving it from Uldren. He had set up caches for anyone and everyone who he thought might have been the one to put a bullet in him for the final time, in the hopes of getting the final say. Funnily enough, there isn't one for Uldren, but there is one for, quote, whichever hunter who kills me.
This one's for any hunter who kills me. Best guess, Marcus Wren? You realize you get my stuff now. All my stuff. Including the Hunter Vanguard gig. Yeah. Congratulations, dummy. That's what we call a Vanguard dare. Sucks, doesn't it? Okay, brace yourself for some advice, hotshot. 1. Know your people. Like my Nessa scout, Qantas Ree. I like to call her about once a moon, else she gets a little too much night. Not enough stalker, you know? 2. Keep your weapons sharp. Your job's to watch everyone's back, which means no one's watching yours but you. And 3. Start thinking now about what you want to do for your successor's Vanguard dare. 'Cause trust me, kid, this gig will kill you.
It's worth mentioning that upon Crow's initial resurrection, his class wasn't known, but very heavily speculated. Call a spade, you know? Uldren Sov walked like a hunter, talked like a hunter. Crow was very likely going to end up being a hunter, which he did, so. The next time we see any talk of Crow taking on the Hunter Vanguard position, it's during Season of the Haunted. After he is faced with the nightmare visage of Uldren Sov and works to accept him rather than reject him, he speaks proudly and with determination about taking up the responsibilities that Cade left behind.
Second chances. Turns out I've been using mine wrong. I thought being a guardian was my destiny, that wielding the light for good was the most I had to offer. But it's clear now. This is what the Traveler chose me for. I was reforged in the light for a purpose, to remake something dead and gone into something beautiful. To learn how to forge something new from what we were. Everything Uldren did to the reef, the scorn, Fikrul, I have a responsibility. No. A calling to make them whole. And I can't replace Cade. But I can cover his old patrols. Maybe organize the hunters a bit, if they'll let me. Clean up some of my mess. I don't know if I can fix everything Uldren left broken. But I can try.
So whilst Crow says that he can't replace Cade, that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't become Vanguard. And the hunters need a Vanguard. That's something else that's been set up not only by Crow himself here, mentioning that he needs to organise them, as his voice lines in Defiance show he's managed to, but also in the lore page for Tommy's matchbook, which dropped in the Season of the Worthy before the Beyond Light DLC. "I'm Tommy," said the ghost. "I'm Ghost," said the hunter. Ornor holstered the minuet, made another visual sweep of the room. "Where is everyone? Hunters have been hard to find in the tower. Bounties and strike assignments are piling up." Tommy cocked his shell. Drifter must have the Praxis working overtime. Since Cade died, Ghost drew a long knife across the back of his armoured fist. It sang coldly. "Every single hunter worth their salt is either out on a mission to save the world or spending their time away from the city, to avoid the Vanguard dare." Ornor looked from Ghost to Tommy, and back again. "Listen," Tommy whispered, as Ghost sheathed his knife and stepped forward. He held out a long, white-bodied rifle with a flat, disc-shaped drum instead of a standard magazine. "This is the most expensive thing we own. You can have it, just please don't tell anyone we were here. And get someone in that Vanguard chair. The hunters are losing their minds out there. It's also worth mentioning that the season before Beyond Light, we get a lore card highlighting the importance of having a hunter vanguard, and then the season that runs directly after that and concurrent to Beyond Light introduces Crow to us. Coincidence? Well, apparently yes, since we needed to fucking kill Amanda for Crow to potentially take up the vanguard position, but I digress. As a quick aside, I can recognise that some people may hear me talk about Cade and feel that the narrative doesn't need to be weighed down by his death anymore. Which I respect. There are times where even I feel like we don't need another sordid reminder that he's dead. Regardless, Cade was a driving force keeping Amanda and Crow from being civil. His death and Crow not telling Amanda that he was Uldren Sov right after he found out was the thing keeping them from reconciling. If the writers were desperate to keep Cade out of anyone's mouth, they've clearly shot themselves in the foot for it. If you don't address the elephant in the room, it's just going to stomp around a bunch and then throw a female character in the fridge. All of this to say, it's starting to sound and feel like Amanda's death may be a driving force for Crow finally taking up the Hunter Vanguard position. Which is A, an inarguable fridging, because it would mean that Amanda literally died to further Crow's character development, and B, a terrible way to go about making Crow the Hunter Vanguard. As I mentioned, Crow has been set up to take the Hunter Vanguard position basically since he woke up. We all knew it was potentially coming, so why did the inciting incident need to be a female character death? Again, we don't know for sure if this is going to be why he takes it up, if he even does, but if it is, disappointing. If the writers wanted to crutch on Amanda and Crow's relationship as a driving force for the narrative for this season, why not have Amanda yell at Crow that he wouldn't understand consequences if the word was written on his gun? Why not have her tell him about Cade, how much he meant to her in a similar fashion that Mara tried to get Crow to tell her about Amanda? Why not have Amanda, after that wonderful cutscene of her backstory, have a close brush with death and then reminisce about Cade to Crow in anger or in some kind of, tired malaise since she's been fighting so hard and literally saw her life flash before her eyes? Wouldn't any of that spur Crow on to take the more formal position of Hunter Vanguard? To truly start to mend the wound of Cade's presence on their relationship? Wouldn't that be the first step to mending it? Especially if the mentions of Crow organising the Hunters had happened more often and earlier in the season, or even between Season of the Haunted and Lightfall. We saw him, after accepting Uldren as a part of him, talk so, for lack of a better term, maturely about putting his pain to good use. If Amanda painted a picture for him of the honour and responsibility that Cade took on his shoulders, couldn't Crow have a wonderful moment where he realised that he didn't have to be Cade, he just had to step up? The same way that Cade did when he took on the role of Vanguard after Andel's death? Speaking of stepping up, I ask you this. Why is it so incomprehensible that an object of great power in a sci-fi fantasy game wouldn't have an immediate explanation? Why was the entire community losing their goddamn minds over the writing team even daring to place a MacGuffin in the game of Destiny? It became such a great source of contention, such a topic of conversation, that the community reaction even prompted Bungie to spoil a future quest, in the hopes that it would assure people that the writing team knows what they're doing. The veil will be explained. It's simply a mystery object. All is well, please trust us. Where the fuck was that energy when a female character was so obviously fridged? And to make things perfectly clear, I'm not expecting pitchforks and torches and shitty replies to Bungie tweets and Reddit threads about how terrible the season is. When people were complaining about the lack of explanation surrounding the veil, a common shield they'd produced was that oh so typical one of constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is important. I've exhibited plenty of it in this video, but I feel it's important to highlight the fact that we as a community need to put the same amount of energy into critiquing genuinely dangerous tropes as we do into critiquing an unexplained mystery that brings the writing ability of the entire narrative team into question, apparently. Amanda Holliday dying is dangerous for the narrative. It is. The way she died and the way it's being framed is dangerous. The tropes that surround her narrative are incredibly dangerous, because if they're not questioned, they will repeat. And all of the strength that has been given to the female characters in Destiny will be slowly siphoned away. Voice lines cut from the game, relevancy forgotten. Dead for the sake of someone else's growth, because no one said anything. We've had entire DLCs led by strong female characters. seasons too. We've had them carry the narrative on their shoulders. In Shadowkeep, Eris Morn was strong and defiant in the faces of her trauma. It may not have been the best DLC content-wise, but the way the narrative team wove in messages of strength in the face of your own horrors, of healing not being linear but instead a mountain climb, the way that Eris was so focused on the pyramid and gaining answers instead of wallowing in her own grief, it was all written incredibly. Then we have Witch Queen, where pretty much all of the major players were female. On our side of things we had Ikora Rey. Ikora, who had faced so many setbacks and had to stand up against her own fire team when they learned that the Traveler gave the gift of the light to the Hive. She had to look Zavala in the face and say that lamenting over it wouldn't help them. There was even a wonderful moment where Eris stood up for Ikora when Zavala questioned her methods. And it wasn't played as a wow, so girl boss moment, it was just natural and organic. If we want to talk about the importance of constructive criticism, critiquing bad tropes needs to be a priority. Especially when we've seen how fantastic the narrative can be without these tropes, when care and time is put into these big moments. Character death has been done fantastically in Destiny, in a way that makes it mean something important to the narrative beyond its effect on individual characters. It's such a crying shame that it's been done so poorly for a beloved female character, and that all the community seems to have to say about it is, that sucks. And yet a month ago the same people were screaming that the Veil was a terrible plot device. To throw it back to Gail Simone's Women in Refrigerators website, when talking about the possible motives for killing off a female superhero, she says, "It's possible that less thought might be given to the impact the death of a female character might have on the readership. Or, it's possible that there's rarely a fan outcry when a female is killed. You don't have to see things the way that I see them. What I would hope is that if you see people talking about how something is actually, really, genuinely dangerous, you would either look up why or raise those voices. It's not hard to do a Google search. It's not hard to reach out. I've said this before in regards to queer representation, but if you see me talking about something in Destiny that's any kind of social issue, be it about queerness or a dangerous trope, or something that you just don't understand on an intellectual level, and I don't mean that as a jab, it's just some people's sphere of understanding only goes so far. No one knows everything. All of that to say, my DMs are open. I'm an open book, I'm here to talk, I'm here to illuminate. I'm a fucking queer she-they, I have opinions, and if you meet me with kindness and a willingness to learn and not get defensive about it, I will meet you in kind. I've tried not to be too ambiguous here, but in case there is any questioning, I do believe that Amanda Holliday was fridged, and I'm so incredibly sad and frustrated by it. Bungie cannot spend the entirety of International Women's Month raising up these female characters on Twitter only to kill off a woman in the most male-gazy way, and then focus the grief onto her male friend. Not when we have tangible proof that they can do better. This is a misstep, one that can be righted if the narrative team are careful about Crow's future actions and the way they handle potential future deaths of female characters. And if we hold ourselves and each other accountable too. I still have faith in Bungie. Truly, I do. They've always been a paragon of going against the grain, of having female characters at the front and centre and writing unashamed queer characters into their stories. A fumble like this is something that I don't want to see again, and I don't want it to drag down the exemplary standard and example that Bungie has established in their writing already. And that's it. That's it. Those are my thoughts. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and let me know your respectful thoughts in the comments below. You can find my card with links to my socials in the description in case you want to take me up on chatting about stinky narrative tropes or just watch me yell into the void. Have a wonderful rest of your day, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.